Hello, bower birders.
Hello, Mr. Benjamin.
Hello, Nick. How are you?
Good. Today we are going to be talking about tariffs and architectural publishing, the impact on architects
Don't
and
don't switch off.
publications.
Don't switch off yet. We're not actually talking about tariffs. What we're talking about is economic shock generally and what impact that has on architecture publishing. So you've come to the right place.
Yeah, we don't want to hurt ourselves too much by delving into politics. That's not our world. But we do want to think about what's going on and how we navigate, let's say, uncertain waters and what that does to publications and also how you maintain your presence from a marketing standpoint as well. So, who knows when you're watching this and how much has changed in a week or so, but we're filming at the end of April and we're currently in this world where I think the easiest way of describing it is everybody's kind of on pause, waiting to see where the chips are going to land.
Yeah, I mean, the economists are basically saying, look, there's a lot of uncertainty here, which is mostly coming from US tariffs. So again, we may say the name once, but these are Trump's tariffs that everyone knows about all throughout the media. But the reality is it's just another one of those economic shocks that a lot of businesses that's not within their control to arrange for these sorts of things.
So we basically have a change of the supply chain throughout the entire world. So what we've done is we have reached out to a range of different people, including journalists, publishers, architects, and product suppliers. And we're trying to get their feedback on what they think might happen or how they're viewing the world or some of the challenges they might have or some of the opportunities they might have as well. Because this story is one of a lot of change, which means you often have winners and losers. And I think the way we're going to break it up is we're probably going to talk about the impact on publications as one group, and then we're going to talk about architects and how they navigate this period and make sure they maintain their presence in the world and not just fade away into obscurity. How does that sound?
Sounds good to me. I think that the overarching theme is that I don't think anyone really knows. And it feeds into that theme of uncertainty. So when you have an economic shock like this, it's usually a shock because it's unexpected and it's also really uncertain how it's going to land. So even with the feedback from the people who are on the ground, the publishers and product suppliers and architects, everyone's like, we don't know what's going to happen. And that comes back to this idea of a pause rather than a necessary downturn or recession or anything like that. It feels very much similar to the early days of COVID, which, funnily enough, was April. Back in April 2020, there was this sense of everyone was just like, what's going to happen here? And I think that's probably the most fascinating part of this whole story is it doesn't take away tariffs and politics and you just go, it's a huge interruption to international supply chains and international trade because of that. Yeah, an
I,
economic shock.
and the other aspect of that is so you have a pause, but we also have a general cycle where you have dips and then you have booms. So even if we are going into a dip cycle for a period of time, you would be expecting that to change at some point. So if you zoom out a little bit, our mindset is when does that flip and what do you do in that meantime to make sure that you are still present and that you are ready for when the good times come back. And that could be, again, we're in uncertain times. That could be in 2 months or it could be in 2 years. We just don't know. That's the challenge. I think that's why people are pausing because they're trying to figure out how to navigate that.
Yeah, and I think that the interesting thing there is, again, comparing to COVID, COVID was very much people were thinking in many months and years. Even when that first struck, it was how long is this going to last? Whereas with this one, it feels like someone might be in a little more control. So it feels like it could bounce back a lot faster. So that's one thing I'd keep in mind is that you may be talking weeks rather than months and years for that shock to wear off.
So let's let's go to the world of journalists first and have a look at some of the potential impact and how some of these publications may be trying to navigate this. So the first thing would be if projects are going on pause, it means that eventually there's less content that is becoming available for those publications.
Yeah, I think it's sort of similar to something that happens on an annual basis. So annually, Christmas time is usually when websites that publish architecture, they tend to struggle to get content. So you haven't got people sending through projects because they're going on Christmas break. But also Christmas is often a deadline for residential projects, things like that. So they really struggle to find stories in that time. And I think this is a similar thing. If people aren't getting their projects photographed, if projects are maybe slowing down in their phases, then there's always going to be a flow on effect to the publications.
Which has a positive and a negative as an architect, depending on how you view that. So, if you have content right now, then you are at a competitive advantage because you're not competing with the same number of architects that you may have been 2 years ago. Like there was definitely a peak 2 years ago. There was a lot of construction coming post COVID. And so you would have been competing against many, many small architects as well who had entered the market, who are doing really cool stuff. And so this means overall, because this is happening globally as well, this is a little bit different to one country slowing down. This potentially is a pause where everyone's just taking a breath. So if you have that content, this is the time where you may have advantage for those publications.
Particularly with print as well. Print will be the kind of, in a way, they're the canary in the coal mine, because print are looking for, most often, for total exclusives. And so those are the projects that will drop off the fastest, whereas existing content going out online, it's not as hard online to get that content coming through. But print will be still looking for those exclusives, and they'll start to reduce because people most likely just aren't getting projects photographed as quickly or as often as they were before.
Which is another advantage. If you have a beautiful unpublished project, this potentially is the time to try and get the front cover or to get that exclusive with a high status publication. Because again, the content numbers are going to be dropping around the world. That would be our guess of what will happen over the next couple months. So, what else is going to be happening with these publications?
Well, I think this is something we've been trying to talk more and more about over the last few weeks, but definitely, through the podcast, is to say publishers. You got to understand the model of publishing, right? So you move to thinking about advertising. So people who advertise in publications, they're often small businesses, so they're taking that same moment to go, right, what's going on? Let's maybe potentially pause some of our spending while we wait and see what happens next. So I think from the publisher's point of view, their sales team are probably going into overdrive to try and get those advertising dollars through the door as well.
So we reached out to a few product suppliers to try to get their take on what was happening. Like, was the entire world falling down, or were they seeing this as a good thing or a bad thing? To our surprise, the product suppliers were a bit like, we're just waiting to see. This could be quite good for us because our raw material costs could drop. It could be bad for us if our sales drop as well. It also depends on the country they were in and where they sell to. So if you are outside the US, some people are thinking this could be quite good for them. For people inside the US, it may be quite expensive for raw materials and construction with things like steel or timber coming from outside of the US. So there's this whole shift going on in that sort of supply chain.
The other thing that came up is the price of products. So if you're talking about things, generally sort of furniture and those loose items, in the US, you've got DHL, which is a massive, I guess, logistics company. They're the ones who are importing this stuff through their sending processes. They put a pause on anything above $800, I think. And that's it's different policy to the tariffs, but it is another policy that is changing things. So it depends on the product that you're selling as well. Are you selling raw materials? Are you selling, windows and sort of materials based stuff, or are you selling individual products? Because there can be an immediate impact on those things for a lot of these companies.
So, what we would be thinking might happen is that publishers are having to shift who their advertising dollars are coming from, because there's going to be winners and losers in that product world. And so the people that may have been advertising, quite for some time, they may be dropping out of the market and somebody else may be jumping in to fill that gap. So again, I think this is just sort of a period of change and then figuring out how you can try to be on the better side of that change rather than the negative side of that change.
Yeah, so basically, I think the impact for publishers is content and advertising. But again, I don't think it's a pessimistic view. Like you're saying, it's a reordering of things, which is always in my mind. That's again comes back to this idea of a pause. Everyone's kind of going, okay, cool. Where have all the pieces landed, and how do we navigate through that path?
So, a tip here for architects is if you want your project to be more valuable to publishers right now, make sure you include product because
Answer. Yeah.
because the publishers are probably having to shift their advertising dollars. So they need to know the products that are in your projects so that they can rearrange that side of their business. So if you've got 10 projects coming in and they have no product versus 10 projects coming in that have a really solid schedule of products, which ones do you publish right now? You're going to publish the ones that lead you to your advertising dollars because you need to. Otherwise, that publication won't exist in 12 months.
Look, this is already, rather than thinking about this as impacting editorial decisions, most publications will ask you for that content. Like if you're going to get published in something, they're going to ask you for the product schedule because their sales team uses it. So it's more, if you provide it up front, it's going to be a lot easier for those editors and they're going to like you more. Just naturally, subconsciously, they're going to be like, oh, good, you've given me everything I need.
The other thing that may happen with publications is shifting the types of content they publish. So I've noticed quite a few unbuilt works, sort of either awards programs or asking for this type of content. And I'm wondering, is that to offset any dip in finished projects coming through their pipelines?
I think a lot of those programs, have started pre this particular economic shock. But I think it's a general trend towards hedging your bets. So as an industry, we've been through a couple of shocks in the last 5, 10 years. We know that the more diverse you can be, the better. But that's 100%. If you can get a lot of this great unbuilt visualizations from architects and build a content stream around it, you're protected against these shocks where things might not be being built or completed at the same rate. So, yeah, I think 100% it's a response to the uncertainty of our times, perhaps. But yeah, you can see how now, if you're a publisher who's doing a lot more unbuilt work, you've hedged against any slowdown in the built work publishing.
Yeah, we may also see certain sectors within architecture, maybe not booming, but there may be some sectors which are slowing down versus some which have got more heat. And so you may just see a shift for some publications, especially niche publications. I imagine that there may be some areas which maybe hospitality slows down or office spaces slow down. Again, we don't know what that balance will be, but you could see again publications trying to shift what are they talking about and how do they basically fill their editorial calendar with content that their audience actually wants.
And I think that's the thing, like any reordering of an economic system comes with opportunities and risks as well. And it's just understanding what those are. But if you don't see the opportunity when it's right in front of you, you could miss that very easily. If you're wait until things are a bit more certain, you've probably missed that opportunity, which is essentially that's Wall Street, right? That's what the stock markets do. They're kind of coming in and they're going, hey, there's an opportunity here because the market is going down or people aren't doing it. You buy at that point and then the market goes up. And so this is a very similar thing. If the market for getting published is tightening a little bit and you come in with the product that they're looking for, your opportunity is much higher now than if you wait, 6, 12 months.
We reached out to a few journalists and asked them what their sense was. So this is separate to publications. So you imagine you have big publications with an entire content team. Then you may have a whole series of freelancers who work for different publications. We had mixed comments coming back. Some people were saying that it's busy for them or it's hard for them to get content at the moment. So the architects are busy in the sectors
Mm.
that they were working in, which we thought that was quite surprising. And we weren't sure if that's because architects right now are focused on getting every project finished that they can, or if this was actually the pipeline of projects was still quite strong.
Well, I think it's this thing with architecture that everything, because it's such long timelines, there's so many projects that are, they've already, the ball has already started rolling. You don't stop the project because it would cost you more. So they're still going. And I think architects, as always, will be focused on the work that needs doing because that's where the invoices come from. That's where the money comes from. So I think the fact that journalists are finding it hard to get responses from architects in this time is a reflection of architects going, great, let's focus on the work we've got. But again, that's an opportunity. Journalists are having a hard time finding content. If you've already created the content, or you are the one who goes and commissions a photographer to photograph a project that's, completed, you're going to have something that the journalists need, and so your value goes up.
Absolutely. The other thing that probably is happening with publications is that their staff budgets are tight. We know this over the last. They always are. Because we know the last couple of years hasn't been the easiest years for a lot of publications, as they're battling against different advertising models, and they're trying to make sure they're still relevant, as SEO changes, all these other factors with AI coming in as well. Being a good content provider is actually providing lots of good information, making it easier for the journalists to be able to use your content, because they just have less staff there to support that content creation. So again, it comes back to being prepared as the architect, put in the work so that you can be a good content provider.
All of this for architects and the way that they market their businesses it all comes back to the most basic thing in marketing, which is consistency. You have to be consistent with your marketing. So rather than being reactionary, you really want to be consistent. And that means when things don't look as strong, you need to keep going. When things look really good, you need to keep going, rather than responding to these shocks as, okay, well, we're not going to do anything with marketing because we don't know what's happening out there. The people who are consistent are the ones who win the brand game.
Yeah, I noticed this thing, and I've been trying to figure out a term for it, but it's kind of like the fading architect syndrome. It's the architect who had quite a presence 5 years ago, and they're just quietly disappearing. Behind the scenes, we talk to a lot of architects, and we know that maybe the projects for those smaller firms have been sort of harder to find. But it's interesting that when that happens, architects retreat. They tend to be quiet and they don't want to talk about much. And then they might lay off one or two of their staff, and then maybe they work at the university a little bit, and they don't want to talk about what they do until they get another project on the other side of the downturn. This is fascinating because it's counterintuitive to what I would be thinking is a smart strategy of trying to get more work when it's harder to get that work.
Well, and this is the thing about older projects as well. So this is another place where, publications might want the latest project. They might want something that was completed in the last 12 months. But as the marketplace for that content, so as those projects become less and less, those requirements can stretch a little. So but even online has never really cared too much. Most online publications, when something was completed, is this something my audience is going to like? Is it something they're going to click on? So if you have older projects that maybe were featured in one print publication, you got to get them out there as well. Now is the time to lean on that investment you made, those thousands of dollars you spent on photography. Now is the time to go, okay, I'm going to get some value out of that. So especially those architects who had a lot of, maybe a couple of years ago were getting published everywhere and have slowed down. It's like, you don't need to go and commission new photography necessarily. You need to get the value out of the photography you've already got.
Yeah, maybe what we need to do is zoom out a little bit. And what we know will happen is there will be a cycle. And whether that cycle is slowing down right now or it's about to boom, we don't know. But on the other side of that cycle, there is a lot of work. And the question is how you remain present to your audience during that period. Something that, bit of a segue, but looking at how architects build up audiences, they spend years with people following them on Instagram or reading about them, and you actually have this asset here. And when you go through a downturn, if you just turn everything off, what you're actually doing is letting that audience disappear. And what you're really trying to do is keep that audience engaged for that dip so that on the other side of the dip, you're still front of mind.
Yeah. I mean, again, consistency.
Yeah, and that's where, coming back to what you were talking about with finding those older projects, even if you don't have new projects coming through, you're looking for something to talk about. That is the simple recipe. Is it an older project? Is it a niche project or a call out based around a detail? So that's another option. which is saying, okay, you may not have this brand new finished project, but maybe you match whatever the journalists are looking for. Because this was something that, as we were doing research on how publications may shift, they may shift away from purely project based stories to thematic stories because they may just not have the pipeline for the big, amazing, beautiful house, but they may be able to talk about spiral staircases. And they're looking for a way to fill their pages.
Well, I think people underestimate the value of those. So again, this is consistency. This is the little radar pings along the way that as you get published in different places, you're collecting your audience. But also when you get published in something like that, like let's say, we have a call out going for marthastewart.com. Let's say that you have one image and a quote that appears in a marthastewart.com column. You go, well, what's the value of that? How many clients are clicking on that? You get published in that. You then go back to your existing audience and say, hey, we got published here. You're keeping that audience alive. And if you go quiet during that time, they're going to be finding another architect that they love who is talking about all of that stuff. And they're going to go, ooh, okay, I'm going to follow you more. I'm going to be more interested in you.
Yeah, otherwise you're letting yourself go back to zero. It is again similar to going to the gym. We've talked about this consistency, but even in that downturn, you just need to turn up. You may not be at your highest performance because you don't have the latest and greatest project, but you need something to put out into the world. You need to be talking about something. Even if you're repeating stuff, like I know there's architects there on Instagram that repeat images, the same project again and again and again, and it works. They're not having to invest in new content. They're just telling the same story, or they're finding a different way of talking about the same stuff, like revisiting older projects. But you already have all of this stuff there waiting. You just need to go get it from your hard drive. Again, it's looking into the dusty photo syndrome, like getting past that and going, I already have the content. I just need to put it online somewhere.
I think it's this thing we talk about in our business that you can kind of have one of two mindsets. You can have scarcity mindset or you can have an abundance mindset.
Mm.
And the people who look at an economic shock and go, "Oh my god, this has created a an abundance of opportunity," are the ones who are going to see the opportunity everywhere. If you go, "Oh my god, this has reduced everything in my life and I can't afford to do anything," and you take that sort of more negative approach, then guess what? You're not going to see those opportunities that are right in front of you.
Well, you're going to create the thing that you're looking towards. You're going to see everything as going down and you won't see the opportunities. The other area, which we didn't ask anybody about this one, but our sense is that media staff in the larger firms often disappear in these phases, which is always it seems like an odd strategy where you're in a period where you are trying to get your name out into the world to secure the jobs that are out there. And then you cut off the head of the person who can do that for you.
This is a direct request to every large practice director out there. Do not let go of your comm staff. Retain them. If there is a downturn, invest more in them, add a staff member to that team. And, you can't stop talking about yourself during a downturn or during an economic shock. You need to be talking more. That's where you should be increasing your budget spends. Potentially, that's the only place you should be increasing your budget spends. But it's really, really important. And because if you don't stay relevant during those downturns, honestly, people notice either subconsciously or consciously, they notice that you're not as present as you were before.
I think it's the subconscious. You get this sense over time. And then once it becomes obvious, you go, oh, that person's gone. They've just disappeared. They're not front of mind anymore. But yeah, large firms, you can see why they do it in the sense of we're putting all of our money into the staff who get us
Of course.
billable hours. Because it's a service based industry, you need to keep the staff who actually make you the dollars. The challenge is, again, the long term strategy there is not a good one. You're starving yourself in the next few months rather than trying to maintain some base now. Mentally going, just keep going through the process. It's like turning up to the gym. What are you talking about today? How are you presenting yourself? Just keep going through it, sustain that, knowing that on the other side, you are going to have work and it is going to be a prosperous time if you stay in the game.
And communications, like talking about your practice, doing marketing, it has a multiplier effect. Right. So those staff members in your team, you don't need as many of them because they have that multiplier effect. The work that they do makes an audience a lot larger, and it is consistency and long term. That's why you continue to invest in it.
Another opportunity, when things are slower on the drawing board side of things, is to actually get your marketing and communications in order. Whether you're a sole practitioner and you're just sat there and you're waiting for the next job to come through, this is the time where you can reboot your homepage, make sure your testimonials are up to date. Even thinking about the projects you really want to have in the future and making sure that you're communicating that, because you may not have had time before, you were just being responsive, but you're saying, this is what I specialize in. I want to talk about this. And I'm going to spend the next 8 months talking about it again and again and again, knowing that on the other side of the dip, you're going to be ready and well positioned for the projects you actually want to get.
And we saw this during COVID. Essentially, a lot of people went, "Hey, we're stuck at home, and I'm looking at my website," and that triggered a lot of people to go, "Okay, so now is the time for me to start focusing on that stuff." Because I think architects actually enjoy focusing on brand and marketing and all of that stuff. It's just it always drops down to like number 4 on the priority list because the builder's calling and you've got a client meeting and all these things that come before it naturally. So I think, yeah, when these times do happen, if things do start to slow down on the design side, take that opportunity, take a breath, think strategically, and get your ducks in a row.
Well, think about where you can get content. Like, can you make better content yourself? Can you use your phone? Can you actually go through the practice of creating more regular content? There's people out there who will make videos for websites. Like the number of conversations we have, not all of that content is paid. You have the ability of actually creating content right now, which is affordable, which is interesting. Well, another big question is what's happening with photographers. Surely, photographers at the moment are going to be looking for work and projects to be able to photograph.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is a great time to reconnect with your photographers because if all of it's slowing down, then yeah, the photographers who you rely on, like remember this, if you've got a photographer there who you have a relationship with, you rely on them being there in 6 to 12 months' time when your next project finishes. So start talking to your photographer now, seeing how they're going, because there could be lots of opportunities with photographers around not just standard project shoots, but shooting things like detail shots, coming in for a couple of hours to photograph your studio, for example, that you've never gotten around to photographing. Just think about those opportunities that are there that may not mean $1,000 investment in a full day shoot, but is going to help those photographers during a little bit of a slowdown potentially as well.
Well, because you want to maintain that ecosystem. It's the ecosystem where there's the value. So as an architect, you don't want to see all the photographers go off and become baristas because they may not come back. It's the same issue we had in COVID with like restaurant staff who just sort of disappeared out of the market. And it takes a long time for that to come back. So figuring
Probably the bigger risk with photographers is that they go off and start doing things like government work, which is quite often a lot more lucrative, way less interesting, but a lot more lucrative. Where you're going and working for, New South Wales Water or something.
some crazy jobs, which
Yeah.
which turn out to be very, very lucrative.
Yes.
The other thing that pops into my mind, let's jump over to maybe large practices again. They actually have these massive portfolios. Even medium sized practices do. The ability to just
Even
go,
small practices who've been around for 10 years have a huge portfolio.
like we're talking about, go find an old project. You don't need to find an old project. Just go and upload every single project you have to Bowerbird right now, and you probably have your marketing campaign for the next 12 months. It probably is that simple. Not because they're the latest projects, but because they're new to publications who haven't seen that project. There's people on the other side of the world they're going to be looking for content. So if you're the one providing it, you're just going to be positioned well rather than if you're not doing anything, you're just sort of hiding away.
Well, and the other thing is we talk about this a lot, but being responsive. If a journalist contacts you right now, I understand you're busy with your other work, but respond to the journalist. If you are there in their time of need when they're trying to get content, respond, respond, respond. That's mainly what they're looking for, especially with those articles where you might be like, they're asking about, spaces with a particular color. If you're the one who jumps in and gives them the content they need at that moment, they are going to love you forever. Seriously.
I would also imagine that articles around topics will become more appealing to publications. So you imagine an architect who is willing to talk about a subject, put effort into writing about it, and actually do it well. I imagine those stories, which, you know, 2 years ago would have been very hard to pitch because there's this waterfall of content of brand new projects everywhere. But right now, your ability to pitch yourself as an expert in some field and get a full article published, I imagine that's probably right now is the best time you're going to have for some time to be able to do that stuff.
Yeah. Look, I think, everyone wants that, or everyone needs that level of security. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You need to make sure that, you're fed and watered and your staff are all secure. But if you are in that position where everything is okay right now, then you definitely need to be looking at doing more, being consistent, staying relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to just be talking and talking and talking. Not again, you don't have to be doing the biggest marketing campaign. You just need to show up. So if you're showing up every week, then you are actually going to be winning this game compared to probably, I don't know, 50% of the architects out there. I think right now it's actually probably not that hard to win. You may not be getting projects. And when I say win, what I mean is to actually build your profile just because of that, then everything's up and down, and you just want to make sure you're the one that's there and present. And I think you'll naturally get coverage just by showing up. Cool. Have you got any other thoughts on tariffs?
Just I don't want to ever hear that word again in my life. Like, I think we need a break from talking about it. But yeah, I think, economic shocks. The overall thing is that when there's an economic shock, there's going to be opportunities for you. Yes, there's going to be challenges, but looking for the opportunities during those times is what keeps you consistent.
Yeah, and also being positive. I think we were talking about this before about positive marketing and actually looking for the positive outcomes. So the last thing an industry needs is to be talking about how everything is bad. What you're looking for is the opportunity. Then you're doing two things. You're looking for the opportunity. You're looking at the big picture and knowing that good times will come. And three, figuring out how you support those existing ecosystems. Make sure you maintain them, even if there's, all sorts of discounted deals going on behind the scenes. But as long as everybody is active for that pause period, then on the other side of it, you turn it back on and you're ready to rock it again.
Absolutely.
Very good. Well, thank you very much, Benjamin. We survived a
Thank you.
topic which we were wondering if we should do or not do, but
And we only said that name once as well.
yes,
So
yes, yeah. Very good. Thank you for tuning in. If you do like this content, please give it a like. Also, please contact either Ben or myself on LinkedIn. You can find myself, Nic Granleys, and Ben G. Morgan.
that's right. Not Benji. Ben
Benji
G.
Morgan. We're always asking for comment on these subjects because it makes these episodes better. So thank you very much for everybody who contributed on this one.
Fantastic. We'll
Okay.
see you next week.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye.